Good evening and welcome. It is 6:30. It is Monday, September the 27th, 2021, and I'm calling to order tonight's Planning Commission meeting. Tonight's Planning Commission meeting will be held virtually by using Zoom and in person while following social distancing guidelines. As chair, I'll be leading the Planning Commission meeting, and the public is welcome to participate when invited throughout the meeting. Members of the public may attend the meeting in person or join via Zoom. If attendees experience problems on Zoom, we suggest you leave the meeting and then rejoin. This has usually fixed the issue. Additional instructions on how to participate are also posted online on the Burnsville website, that's burnsvillemn.gov, in the public meeting calendar. As usual, tonight's meeting is available for viewing on BCTV and on the city's website. If you're unable to participate this evening and would like to submit public testimony, I encourage you to email your comments to city staff or mail directly to City Hall. You may participate in tonight's meeting online by joining us on zoom.us/join and typing in the meeting ID 940-6252-5562. Once you're logged into the meeting, please use the chat feature to tell the moderator which item you wish to speak to, and we will address you at that time. You may also call into the meeting at phone number 651-372-8299. Again, our meeting ID is the same, 940-6252-5562. For each public hearing, I will open up a time when callers may speak to that item and give more instructions at the time. Your call will be muted until then. Please note there might be a slight delay due to differences in technology. So if you're speaking by phone, please mute your computer so there's no echo effect going on. With that, we'll move right into the agenda. You should all have received the agenda with your packets this week. Do I have a motion to accept said agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Timmerman. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
So second by Commissioner Anderson. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Didn't think so, it passed. On September the 13th, we had a meeting, and all those notes and the minutes are included in the packet. Hopefully you got a chance to look at it. Any changes, commissioners? Any changes, staff?
No changes.
No changes, great. With that, I'd be willing to take a motion. Commissioner Wallace.
I'll make a motion.
Commissioner Wallace makes a motion.
I'll second the motion.
Second by Commissioner Awad. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No one does. So that brings us to our very first regular item on the agenda, and that is the application of Minnesota Cemetery Corporation for a conditional use permit amendment for an expansion to increase the number of cemetery plots within the western part of Pleasant View Memorial Gardens Cemetery located at 400 Highway 13 East. One of our city planners, Ms. Sarah Madden, will present. Ms. Madden, your floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Planning Commissioners. So the item before you this evening is a continuation of something that was recently reviewed last month by the Planning Commission and then reviewed earlier this month by the City Council. So following the Planning Commission meeting, city staff received a public comment letter related to the application from a neighboring property owner and included that in the background for the City Council report. At the City Council meeting, the item was pulled from the consent agenda by a representative from a neighboring property owner, and the City Council had a discussion amongst themselves and with the neighbor about some of the issues that they had kind of identified in their comment letter, which was attached to your report this evening. Based on that discussion, the City Council did direct staff to send this back to the Planning Commission for time for staff to review some additional kind of drainage-related matters on the plans, and then work with the applicant based on that feedback. So now we have kind of done that. So the city staff has met with the applicant group to go over the comments at the City Council meeting, and we have received revisions to the plans that were reviewed last month at the Planning Commission. So just to kind of go over again, quick application details. The property here is zoned R1, and that would allow cemeteries as a conditional use. So it is an existing cemetery for a number of years. The amendment was related to an expansion of the footprint of the conditional use, which was an expansion of cemetery plots in the western portion of the cemetery property. After sending it back, we did receive some revised plans. So this southwestern portion of the expansion area is no longer proposed as part of the CUP amendment. So the public comments that staff received for city council related to drainage concerns of water and runoff. Some of the images sent by the neighboring property owner were included as part of their letter. So some concerns related to drainage and related to parking. So the property owner representative attended the city council meeting and wanted to make sure that this was something that was discussed as part of the conditional use. And as a result, the applicant group did choose to remove this portion of the work from the current scope for the CUP amendment. So this was the area that was adjacent to a wetland, and so there was a wetland delineation done as part of the review prior to the Planning Commission meeting. And just quickly, I'll hand it over to Jen to explain this slide, which will kind of explain the overall water scope on the site.
Thanks, Sarah. So this slide has a lot going on, so I'll try and give you a high-level overview of it. In 2019 and 2020, we had a consultant do an overall stormwater model of our whole stormwater system, and this is a sort of a screenshot of what that is in the 100-year storm event. Everything in blue is flooded, and so that's what the underlying map is. It's showing that there's a significant amount of lighter blue, which is a lower depth of flooding, and the darker the color, the deeper the flooding. The neighboring property, which has got it just to the, thank you, yep, that one, has a darker blue, it's sort of in the middle of its building, and then pipes that lead out to the pink pipes are private storm sewer pipes, and then the green ones are public, so it enters into the public storm sewer and then eventually downstream to the Minnesota River. Also shown on this is the Minnesota Highway 13 corridor, and we have some drainage arrows shown in sort of a red with a yellow arrowhead showing the direction of water along 13 in the ditch. And when you get to that green storm pipe, that's a culvert, it starts to divert outside of the MnDOT right-of-way and goes through the cemetery. Along that red line is somewhat of a eroded channel that's formed over the years. It's not, a typical channel would be armored with a big rock to keep the water. This is not like that. It is just eroding away. So that's a natural drainage pattern coming from 13 through that red line, which is the channel, and into the wetland. At the wetland, there is no storm outlet pipe or structure. It just infiltrates, and in a heavy event, it won't infiltrate. It'll just spill over, and then the spillover is that other arrow that, yep, right there. Thank you, Sarah. That goes directly into the neighboring property. So this was not analyzed to a great detail with the first round of comments because this is an existing condition that the cemetery was not doing anything to make worse. It was the same condition. We did ask the cemetery to provide a letter saying that they were not concerned with a minor amount of flooding over cemetery plots. So we wanted to protect that, but until we received the letter from the neighboring property, didn't really understand that their concern was so great as it travels directly into their property. So what's been done, do you want me to keep going with what we've been doing to date, or do you have another slide?
I do, but it's about that, so you can keep
Okay.
going.
Oh, go ahead, this is the northwest?
Yeah.
Okay, so we met with the applicant to go through this and the drainage pattern and what we understand to be the modeled flooding occurrences. Oh, one other thing, that black dashed line, yes, right there, is kind of a high point ridge. So drainage is kind of blocked from continuing down the drainage ditch. because it's a high point there. So then that is the only way for it to go is to the north and west. So in meeting with the applicant, one of the solutions we came to is that we needed to confer with MnDOT and see what kinds of ideas they could bring to the table. But working with MnDOT doesn't happen immediately, so we have to take some time. They had a more of an immediate need to expand the cemetery, so the interim solution was to pull out the cemetery plots that are in that drainage flow area, and then have a condition of approval that no additional expansion can occur until this is mitigated. Did I go too far?
No, you're great.
Okay.
Thank you, Jen. So in keeping with that, the portion of the CUP that we would be discussing tonight is unchanged in that the north portion of the site is still an expansion area, and that same approximately 3 acres within this area, generally north of their access road and in a small area here, is still proposed to be tree removal, graded, and expansion of cemetery plots. So shown here is, this is the same plans from last time, showing that there is some grading done in this larger area here in the north, and some areas where they will be increasing the number of plots in all of these areas and north of their existing drive aisle. What is different from the plans this time is that the area directly north of the drive aisle has been kind of removed of those first couple of plots on the row, and so that is so that the property owner can maintain parking ability. Currently, when visitors to the site come in for an event, they would kind of park all in a line and maybe off to the side, off of the drive aisle, and so by not increasing the number of plots that close to the access road, they can maintain that pull-off ability for someone to visit during an event and maintain the existing parking that they have. So shown here is an exhibit that was also provided as a response to the comment letter. In the comment letter that was attached to your background report, there was some references to some parking. So what they've provided is showing kind of when they have events where they know the visitors to the site have been parking, and showing that they are maintaining the ability to have that parking to the north of the drive aisle, and then also showing that there are other places which do not have cemetery plots adjacent to the drive aisles that visitors to the site do use as parking. They provided this in exhibit, and there was also a narrative letter attached to your Planning Commission report. So just kind of some considerations. So the proposal will still require a city grading permit following a city council approval of this conditional use permit application, as well as general construction permits and lower min approval from the watershed district. So just to restate, they have removed that southwest portion and are still moving forward with the northern portion of the expansion, and we are going to help the applicant kind of coordinate for them to be able to work with MnDOT to mitigate some of these drainage concerns and open up that pathway to discussion. Future changes to a CUP do have to be authorized by an amendment due to the intensification of use, since we have added the condition of approval that Jen mentioned, that at the next time that there is an expansion of the cemetery plot area, that drainage and mitigation of those issues will need to occur at that time. We are supportive of the application and the revisions. I have been communicating with the representative from the neighboring property owner who had sent the letter originally. They reviewed the staff report in advance of tonight's meeting and said that they did not feel that they needed to attend after reading the report and seeing the revisions. So with that, so we do have an updated recommendation of approval to the City Council, subject to the same condition as last time, which is that the conditions of previously approved CUPs remain in full force and effect, with the addition that the future expansion will require some mitigation of the drainage concerns that we see impacting the site and adjacent properties. So with that, I can stand for questions. The public hearing was already completed at the last time this was reviewed, so this is not a public hearing.
Thank you, Ms. Madden. Commissioners, any questions for city staff? Whether that be Ms. Madden or Ms. Desrud? I'm not seeing any. It seems pretty straightforward to me. It looks like, sounds like the person that was filing the complaint is comfortable with what we got going. So I would be willing to hear a motion. Commissioner Anderson.
I'd like to make a motion that we recommend to the City Council approval of the Conditional Use Permit Amendment for cemetery expansion subject to the following 2 conditions.
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. Commissioner Wad?
I will second the motion.
All right, a motion was made by Commissioner Anderson, second by Commissioner Awad. All in favor of said motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? None, okay. Well, this will move to Tuesday, October the 5th, City Council meeting at 5:30 in these very chambers. And we'll move on to the next piece, which is a public hearing for the application of the City of Burnsville for a zoning map amendment to rezone the listed parcels of land to the mixed-use zoning district to align with the recent update to the 2040 Comprehensive Land Use Plan. Ms. Madden, I believe it's you again?
Yes.
All right, floor is yours.
Thank you. So this next item is related to a comprehensive plan amendment that was reviewed by the Planning Commission back in March and April. So this kind of goes back a long time. So in January 2020, we had a city council work session where in offhand discussion prior to that meeting, it had been mentioned that staff should kind of talk to the city council about where our mixed-use zoning was and where it could be. So we prepared a kind of a presentation at that meeting to go over some sites that we thought were compatible with the mixed-use development patterns. And at that meeting, they directed the city staff to come forward with the necessary kind of background to do the comprehensive plan amendment to re-guide the parcels of land to the new mixed-use land use, and then later a rezoning. So throughout 2020, there was some legwork kind of done related to research and really honing in on what sites were best and compatible with the new land use and zoning, and then working with the Metropolitan Council to identify what the process should be, if we should split it up into 5 different areas, if we should do them all in one. After all of that work, finally in the beginning of 2021, we did start to actually do our public outreach and reaching out to neighboring property owners of the sites, as well as the owners of the sites themselves that we had identified. So there were some virtual meetings held for the property owner, and updates to the city website. There's a mixed-use planning page, actually, that's still on the website with all the updates and the work that staff has been doing on this. And at the public hearing in April, I had guessed that we would have the rezoning scheduled by the 3rd or 4th quarter of 2021, and it looks like we're right on track for that. So the final resolution of adoption after the Metropolitan Council had reviewed the comp plan amendment was adopted by the City Council last month in August. So we are able to move forward with some rezonings, which are the item this evening. So just to go over kind of the zoning map as a whole, City of Burnsville. So this proposal would bring an additional 50 acres of mixed-use zoning to the zoning map. So there are an existing 414 acres of mixed use in the city. That does not include the 163 acres that are in the TOD zoning district, the transit-oriented development. In the comprehensive plan amendment, some of the sites that were re-guided to mixed use or to heart of the city are not proposed in this evening. That's because the TOD rezoning initiative took place last year, so their zoning is already in place when it was subject to this comprehensive plan amendment. However, if you were to omit the TOD zoned properties, as well as 2 properties that were omitted prior to submittal to the Metropolitan Council, we did remain with generally 4 areas to be rezoned to mixed use following the comprehensive plan amendment. So of the first area, here at the intersection of Cliff and River Hills, a mixture of B-zoned properties, B2 neighborhood business, and R3B high-density residential. So approximately 12 acres new of mixed use at this intersection. Second general area for Nicollet Avenue South and River Ridge, about 13 acres of property that's zoned B3 to be zoned mix. And then Burnsville Parkway and County Road 5, as well as 136th. This is a mixture of B2, B3, and R3B. So that would be neighborhood business, general business, and high-density residential, adding several acres of the mixed use in this area. And then Nicollet Avenue South and McAndrews Road, property that's currently zoned B1 and B2, so office business and neighborhood business, to be rezoned to mixed use. So the recommendation from staff is that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council approval of the proposed zoning map amendment and the ordinance included in your background report, which formalizes that rezoning.
Great, thank you, Ms. Madden. Any questions? Commissioners for the city staff? Commissioner Timmerman?
Not really questions, just comments, based on kind of what we talked about last time and then seeing this again. Can we pull up the map one more time, please?
This map or the full zoning
This
map?
one.
Okay.
My only comments on this are that the Highway 13 and Nicollet Avenue, I can see those maybe in the near future being rezoned to transit-oriented development because it is so close to that area. And I'm curious if we put any consideration into doing that. I know we did all of that as a big package. And then I just want to continue my concern that I expressed last time with the parcels at Nicollet Avenue and McAndrews. I think that mixed zoning is, it makes sense for what's on the south side of McAndrews there, but it makes no sense for what is currently there to the north and to the east, which is some multifamily, but it moves very quickly into R1 housing. So I have concerns about that particular area, but my question for you is about the Highway 13 and Nicollet Avenue area, if we consider that for TOD zoning.
Thank you. So that's a really good question. This was part of the discussion when we did the transit-oriented development district. Actually, the properties that containing the transit center, for MBTA garage and the neighboring multifamily apartment building, they are zoned mixed as well, zoned and guided mixed use. And at the time that we were doing the 2040 comprehensive plan update, the full update, those were properties that were included in that. And in that comp plan, it was a goal to start the TOD zoning district, so that was kind of an implementation step as well. And so when we went to do that, we wanted to focus primarily on the existing heart of the city, because the TOD code was designed and based off of the base heart of the city zoning, and focusing on expanding to the west for the bus rapid transit that would get to downtown, and not necessarily the transit center that serves the region as a whole. So it was discussed, but then we didn't move forward with moving to the north of 13, seeing 13 as a barrier.
I just think it's really exciting knowing that the state, county, and city are all looking at some type of improvement to that Nicollet crossing of Highway 13. So my hope is by 2040 or well before then, we are in a transit-oriented development type of zoning there, because I think once we have that pedestrian crossover, it will change really the look and feel of that area. So, but thank you for the background. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, commissioners? One quick question I have is, were they selected based on what we see, or were there applications by some of the business owners in the area put in for these mixed use?
That's a great question. So the majority of the areas were selected kind of based on what they were in close proximity to. So mixed zoning as kind of an entire concept does have, I wouldn't say rules necessarily hard and fast, but the American Planning Association does have kind of a list of conditions that you would see that are compatible with mixed use development. So that could be close proximity to multimodal transit. So essentially, is this near trails and major highways and residential of various densities? And is it walkable to a park, or is it on a transit or bus line? So when we were kind of looking at those types of conditions, and there are more, but these were generally what was looked at. So the Highway 13 in Nicollet was looked at because it is adjacent to the transit station for MBTA. Cliff Road and River Hills was looked at. It is on a bigger arterial road in the city, and it also is the place of an upcoming new trail project along Cliff Road, as well as some existing trails that already exist. This piece that's coming is more of a connector piece. The areas by County Road 5 and Burnsville Parkway are adjacent to an existing mixed-use zoning district that is built out now with the final Quick Trip and the apartment building that's under construction. And some of the commercial areas just to the north of that, there are at least one site that is vacant and could be redeveloped. And then there is one site where we have had some interest from an owner about possibly doing something, although they're not quite sure what. And so there were some of those factors were considered. And then for Nicollet Avenue and McAndrews, what is being rezoned as part of this is there's a small shopping center on the eastern side, and then a dental office and parking lot, and they are surrounded on all sides by mixed-use zoning. And so that's why they are included in this. So, as well as kind of a prominent intersection in that mixture of densities. So there is multifamily residential, there's a condominium development, and then the hospital complex, which is a larger, kind of the original mixed-use zoning in Burnsville. So it was kind of a mixture of factors looking at what does the APA say should be a really good mixed-use, successful mixed-use development, what are some site characteristics of that, and then looking at the city and seeing where do we have it, where could it go. We did kind of work with what's it next to that might already be mixed as our base.
Sure. It just seemed like some of the businesses were kind of strange, like, you know, the State Farm agent, or you have, well, the Progressive and the gas station right there on Nicollet there. So maybe it's future thinking, I'm not sure, but that's what was kind of brought that question on. Any rate, without any questions from any other commissioners, I'm going to open up the public hearing. It is 6:56, and the public hearing is open. And maybe you are on Zoom and would like to speak. You can tell the moderator that, or you can, if you're on the phone, you can dial *6, I believe it is, and let the moderator know you want to speak to this issue. And my understanding is nobody is on the phone or in Zoom, so I will go ahead and close this public hearing at 6:57. And I'm going to turn to my commissioners and say, hey, we got a recommendation? Or any other discussion? Commissioner Anderson.
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion that we recommend to the City Council approval of the proposed zoning map amendment and ordinance is drafted.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. Commissioner Anderson has made a motion. Do I have a second? Commissioner Wallace.
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
All right. Seconded by Commissioner Wallace. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none. That is going to be on the consent agenda for Tuesday, October the 5th at the City Council meeting starting at 5:30 in these very chambers. And with that, we will move on to the next piece. I think it has been the most anticipated one by the crowd here tonight. And it is a public hearing for the Junction at 35 and 13 LLC for a planned unit development amendment for setback and height deviations to allow 4 45-foot tall storage tanks to be installed southwest of the existing building at 12600 West Frontage Road. Looks like our other city planner, Deb Garros, is there to present. Ms. Garros, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Commissioners. We do have the applicants here this evening, Mike Whalen and Howard Bouvier, and they can address if there are any questions to the Planning Commission. This application is very similar to one that was approved in 2017. It's just that what is being requested this time is instead of 30-foot tall tanks, which were approved, they're asking for 45, and the location of them is a little bit different. In addition to that, they are looking to have outdoor storage. In 2017, they were approved for outdoor display of tractors or whatever that they produce on site, but not the outdoor storage. So those are the differences. In terms of the application and details, the subject site up to a couple of years ago, was zoned B3, which is our general commercial, and then planned unit development was approved several years ago. And the existing building was constructed in 1974 and had always been a retail building. Then it actually sat vacant for many, many years, and the council approved the first PUD, basically allowing for some industrial type uses that were totally within the building, more like assembly, manufacturing, those types of things. So that's where that planned unit development came into play. The site, at that time, we went through and identified a bunch of deviations and things to memorialize the setbacks so that from then on forward, they could go on. And then we changed the zoning and land use to TOD. So you'll notice in your report, there are lots of deviations that are identified. There are 18 in total. Of those, 11 are related to the new TOD zone and applying that to an existing facility, if you will. So that is where we're at. Land use is mixed use. It's a 4.5 acre lot. The request is to install 4 45-foot tall tanks as opposed to the 30-foot tall tanks that were approved a couple of years ago. They would install a new concrete pad within what is the existing parking lot area for the tanks to be located on. The tanks ultimately would be 21 feet taller than the existing building. When we did the last PUD, before that, there was an approval for the applicant. They were looking at adding on to the top of the building over part of it. They weren't able to do that ultimately just because of the way that the site is constructed, and the existing building would not support that. So we're no longer looking at any kind of addition. They need these tanks in order to store plastic pellets that they use in the production of their business. And then 2017 is that last PUD. In terms of the site location, it's outlined on yellow on your screen. And this would be the aerial photo. Directly to the south of the subject site, on the west frontage road, is Hertz, which is the former Perkins site, and now it's a used cars sales. And then the next building to the west is an office building which has been recently purchased by the applicant. So in the expansion of their business, which has been quite successful, what they're looking at doing is moving some of the office and expanding office in this new building to the south, and then using that space within the building to the north for their more of their processing. So in terms of the site plan, the 4 storage tanks are proposed to be located south of the existing building. In the 2017 PUD, they were going to be placed in between that west lot line and the back of the building. However, at this point, they're a little bit larger, and so the applicant is looking to move those to a location that does meets the B3 setbacks. We have a number of deviations because it's actually in the future there are proposed to be 2 streets, and it's in the front yard and all sorts of things like that. But realistically, there are no site changes per se, other than these 4 tanks in that location. They're looking to have the outdoor storage area south of the building. There are 65 existing parking stalls that basically this area would be converted to outdoor storage, and a new screening fence installed in about this location. The site does have enough parking, existing parking. In fact, there are a couple of parking spaces above what the ordinance requires, and that is based on the new TOD regulations. This is just an indication of the pad, the setback to the tanks from the side, or excuse me, from the rear property line is about 22 feet, 21 feet, 10 inches. And then this is a picture of what the silos would look like. The building is about 24 feet tall, so that's where you get the height differentiation. And in terms of green space, not really any changes because if anything, it's a little bit more green space because they are going to be building on existing impervious surface. Green space within the parking lot remains the same. And as I indicated, their parking does meet the ordinance with that whole area being used as outdoor storage. And these are just the specifics on the parking. In terms of screening, the site is surrounded by mature trees and shrubs. If you've driven out there, you can tell. In addition to that, the topography is such that there's a 20-foot elevation increase between the building and the frontage road on the north side, and then there's an additional increase between the property to the south and the subject site. So there is an apartment complex to the southwest, but basically they are looking out over and above this site for the most part because of that change in elevation, and then there are also the existing trees. And this is just a view up on the left. This is looking into the main access, so you're looking back towards what would be the storage area and where the tanks would be. And you can see with existing mature trees in the parking lot islands closer to the street and then along the frontage road, that actually provides the screening for the most part. And this again just shows, it's hard to see, there is a change in elevation. It doesn't show up so well, in looking at a picture, but I think this picture here really gives you an idea of the change in elevation. So in looking at the site where the towers would be, they will be, for the most part, screened by the building when you're on the highway or freeway or the frontage road. But there will be somewhat visible when there's leaf-off conditions. And in terms of where the deviations come from, this is the TOD regulating plan that the city adopted a year or so ago. And the subject site is right in this location, just on the southwest corner of 35 and 13. And the existing street is this Street C. So there are some deviations that are needed that we identified because the TOD plan is really set up to have buildings abutting or very close to those streets, and then parking less so. And the site is already developed, so in looking at what the existing conditions are, that's why there are so many deviations. The other part of this is that the regulating plan shows future streets to the west of the site and also to the south of the site. Whether or not these will actually be constructed, we don't know. This one, I think, to the west is pretty unlikely just because of the steep topography. However, we did have to address this regulating plan, and there are a number of deviations based on if those streets were to go in, they become front yards as opposed to side yards and rear yards. And this is just a little bit closer look. The benefits to the proposal are the same as the last time. It allows an existing Burnsville business to stay in Burnsville and expand, which is a very large positive. The deviations, I'm not going to go through those individually. They've been included in your packet. As I indicated, 11 of them are related to the new TOD zone, and then the other 6 are ordinance related, the old ordinance, and mostly related to having the structures, the new tanks closer to a front yard because of the regulating plan. So if you have any questions on those, any particular one, I'd be glad to go through those with you. With that, the recommendation is to approve the application, subject to the 8 items that are identified. Number 1, that all the previous CUPs and PUDs remain in effect, except as modified by this amendment. And then the tanks be removed at such a time as those businesses cease to operate. That was in the last approval. We did add the delivery and loading hours. This has been added to the outdoor storage part of the ordinance because of the residential to the southwest. I don't believe that there is a regular delivery. The applicants can speak to that. I believe that they, receive these deliveries a few times a year as opposed to, it's not a daily type of occurrence. Number 4, we did indicate that 8 bike parking spaces be provided. This is something from the TOD ordinance. We felt that the other elements of the TOD ordinance would be very costly to implement upfront. And because there aren't any physical, additions to the size of the parking area, and it's not a principal building that we're looking at, that from a staff perspective, we did not believe that it was necessary to make all of the improvements. However, the bike parking has been something that we've consistently recommended, so that is recommended here. There are a couple of dead or dying trees around the perimeter, so we're just looking for those to be replaced 1-to-1. And then with the exception of the tanks, the storage materials cannot exceed the height of the fence, the screening fence. That's a standard of the ordinance. And the last 2 items are really related to permitting, and this is from the city engineer, just to provide silt fence and inlet protection when they're under construction. So with that, this is a public hearing, and I can stand for questions.
Well, Commissioners, do you have any questions for Ms. Garros? Commissioner Timmerman?
Ms. Garros, thank you, Chair. One of the things that staff supported was slatted chain link fence, and you might have said this, but you just crammed in like months of background and information in about 10 minutes, so I might have missed it.
Yes.
Where on the property is the slatted chain link fence, and has there been any discussion about alternative options?
Well, the ordinance was amended to allow slats. We used to not allow that. They used to have to be permanent, but that was changed, so slats, or if they have there's a material now that can be attached, which is also allowed for screening fence. They are proposing the screening fence would be in this location here in the yellow, kind of orangey yellow.
So that's really only visible on their own property because
Yes,
of
in
the
looking back.
topography
Yes.
to the south. Is that the south there?
Yep.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it's entirely wooded along the south and along the west.
Okay. I know we had long discussions about slats, and I didn't know where we ended up.
That's where we ended up.
All right, thanks.
Sure.
Any other questions, Commissioners? Commissioner Wallace?
Yes, Ms. Garros, just a quick question in regards to the actual tanks themselves. Has the city looked at any other options of being maybe shorter and stubbier so they could still have the volume that they need instead of having basically 2 stories above the existing facility? And then second question is, we see this color on the screen now of just in white. Does the city recommend any other color to kind of blend in more with the landscape and such?
Well, Commissioner, you're a planner. We had, at the 2017 PUD, we did recommend that the towers be painted a color similar to the building. The Planning Commission and Council didn't feel that that was necessary. So we did not make that recommendation this time based on what they had approved before. In terms of the tanks themselves, we're just responding to what the applicant's request is. If this were in an industrial zoning district, they would need to be painted. They are painted in the industrial districts, but again, we're considering what Council and Planning Commission direction was from their last application, and we've not looked at something different. The applicant may or may not need to go quite as tall as these, but they wanted to make sure that whatever they were able to come up with would accommodate their business, so the maximum height would be the 45 feet.
Okay, maybe I can also delay that question then when the applicants come up.
Certainly.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions, Commissioners? Well, I'd like to invite the applicants to come on up and speak to the issue, if they would would like to? And we just ask that you give your name and your address for the record.
Mike Whalen with EFH Company, 2999 West County Road 42, Burnsville.
Thank you, sir.
Members of the Planning Commission and Mr. Chairman, what we're looking at is for his business to adequately supply what the demand is right now is to have that size of tank for the future. He's ordered a couple more machines and then they have a few more coming in 2022 just to meet the demand. And so that height of the tank will satisfy the upcoming purchases of equipment for his business and to keep him going with what he feels is staying in the market, so. That's the reason for the size of the tank and the different products that go in each tank, so.
And obviously, I'm not familiar with these tanks themselves, if they're custom built or if these are just normal sizes, but with that being said, do they offer one that's maybe not as tall and just wider to allow for that same volume of material?
Excuse me, I think that what would happen is the supplier, you're at the mercy of the supplier and what they can get you in the amount of time that you need to get it, you know, they're not, even though they are custom made, but there are certain parameters that they can, based upon the material and everything else, that they can give it to you, and so. I would tell you that probably the 45-foot high tank is not uncommon for what they're doing, so that's why it's proposed as that.
All right, thank you. And then my second question in regards to that as well, then, would you then be open to painting these silos a different color?
As with painting anything, it creates a maintenance issue right away. So I think that the product, when it comes from the factory, it's a painted, or it's a powder coated and it's baked on versus doing it out in the field and you're relying on the guy in the trade to go out there and prep it versus being prepped in a conditioned environment. So I would opt more for the product coming out of the factory in the color versus trying to do something on site. It just, excuse me, over time, it'll never last as long as the product when it comes out of the factory.
Understood, but does the manufacturer, do you know, offer other colors then besides the white powder coat?
I do not know that. Sure.
And again, can you give your name and address for the record?
My name's Howard Bover. I come with Caliper,
Okay, thank you, sir.
and I've been the contractor over there since we got into the building. And yes, business is very good.
Good deal.
When we were here last time, it was kind of funny because I think the chairman says, paint the tanks. I've never seen it paint a tank yet. But to answer your question, yeah, we would like to go lower. The problem with it is we couldn't find anything. We need 200,000 pound tanks because that's what a railroad car brings in. And that's where you get your price breaks. And we have to move it within 15 days after that tank car lands. So we would really like to put up whatever we could get. Now, the bigger the tank, you can't get them here. Trucking is next to impossible. But we could get section tanks made here within the state of Minnesota and put them up. And most likely it probably would be silver. But we most likely then would not have to need the height. And we talked about this long and hard before this meeting when we came here that, would we say, we're not gonna go that, I don't know. We're gonna have a spout on the top and just in case, but I doubt if you're gonna see anything over about 32 feet. And that was kind of way, you know, thankful Burnsville has been very good to us and we've been very good back. We hired people all the time down there. And we're growing leaps and bounds. That's why we bought the office building top of the hill. And I say, soon enough, we're gonna run out of space in that building and come back here again and say we need to add on. But I think that's a good thing for everybody. So, thank you very much for your vote tonight. Appreciate it.
And thank you for the background and congratulations on a booming business.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming in, and obviously Caliber is, you see it off the freeway. I didn't realize what they did, and I was really excited when I saw that, so.
You know what we do, don't you?
Is plastic supply, plastic
No.
for sporting materials?
Number one, we're just-in-time supplier. And what we do in there is we make all the stuff for snowmobile trailers, the added-on stuff, the skids, the plates, the round things you see in front of the trailers. And we make everything between the boat and the trailer, all the rollers, and we're all OEM. So we are the largest, and internationally we are the largest. And on top of that, we have a rubber business in there that buys OEM rubber parts overseas and sells them here locally and all across the United States. So, yeah, we're running out of space. That's the best thing I can do. It's for real 2 pounds in a 1 pound can.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for the applicants, commissioners? Commissioner Timmerman?
I just want to echo what's been said. Congratulations on your business's success. I know that when we saw you last, we were talking about an event facility, and I thought that was a unique use of your space, and so I do have a question if that's going to be pursued? No?
Never gonna happen.
Okay.
You know, that's when the eyes got bigger than the appetite.
Yeah, it was a really interesting use of the space, I would say. But one of the things that I do remember talking about with that was the fact that this is kind of a gateway business to Burnsville coming across the river, and whether that, you know, means we're being invited by unique silos, whether that means we're being invited from Bloomington by new signage. I'd really like to have you guys, as you continue to grow, think about creative ways of partnering with Burnsville to really be that. I mean, Northern Lights has lights, and you see that when you come in. And I just think, you know, whether it's painting something that can be seen or signage, and when we talked about the event center, you know, this is something we ask quite a bit about. So I guess I'm curious if you have thought.
Well, you know,
towards
we've
that.
got a future.
Yeah.
And the next time we come back here, I think you'll be very happy with what you're going to see.
Great.
Because it is gonna fill in kind of where MnDOT wanted it. It'll probably go along the frontage road, which would be just east of the existing building. And it would wind up being our shipping, receiving, with the trucks in behind where you can't see them. And office space above, because we're already growing out of the office space we bought. And I'm sure we're not gonna throw the other tenants out, because they've been there too long. And I think that we could be, within 5 years, and we could be breaking ground up there.
Wonderful.
And it's gonna be a good-looking building. We've already talked about the colors and glass. We want a lot of glass, which means light.
Yeah.
So, and that's one thing that Ernie said, we're gonna make it a showpiece on that corner. Since Deb was so nice to let us have the signage that we wanted. Thank you, Deb.
And you do have a nice color scheme to your logo, and I mean, I never want to call this the old Best Buy again. I want to, you know, call this
Well,
Caliber.
thank God you don't, because that was built on the worst soil I've ever seen.
Any other questions, commissioners? Thank you so much for speaking with us
Thank
today.
you.
And thank you for being such a great partner with Burnsville. We really appreciate having
We
you here.
appreciate Burnsville as well.
Great. With that, this is a public meeting, and I would like to open it up at 7:23. Any members of the public that would like to speak to this issue can do so on Zoom or by phone by hitting *6 and speaking with the moderator. And it sounds like nobody is there. So at 7:23, we will close said public hearing. And with that, I'm going to turn back over to the commissioners for discussion, maybe a motion. Commissioner Timmerman.
I've said what I need to say, and you're all welcome to interrupt me, but I'd like to make a motion to recommend to the City Council approval of the PUD amendment to allow 4 45-foot tall storage tanks, give or take, but 45 foot tall storage tanks to be installed on the west side of the parking lot and allow exterior storage south of the existing building, subject to the, what's the total number of conditions, Deb?
8.
8 conditions. I didn't know if we ran onto a second page.
I have a motion on the table. Would I get a second? Commissioner Awad?
I will second the motion.
All right, a motion made by Commissioner Timmerman, seconded by Commissioner Awad. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No. One opposes, so that goes to, gotta be careful there. It passes, it will be on the consent agenda on Tuesday, October the 5th at 5:30 PM. And these very chambers will have a city council meeting right here, and they will be here. With that, we will move to the next item on our agenda, that is updates. Any updates, commission? Seeing none, I'll turn to our city planners, staff.
Hi, thank you. So, main update this evening, your next planning commission meeting is October 11th. So that meeting will be dedicated entirely to city code updates. So, I know that our last meeting, kind of hit our stride probably long before the, meeting or the item for city code updates. So hopefully we can all be really energized. We'll be talking about, multifamily residential, districts, as well as commercial and industrial, kind of the first, look at it after staff has worked with our consultant. So our consultant will be back to facilitate that discussion on October 11th. But no public hearings, just discussion.
Well, how can we not be energized by that? It sounds great. Well, thank you. With that, it looks like we are at the very bottom of our agenda. I would take any motions to adjourn. Commissioner Wad?
Thank you. I move that we adjourn.
Commissioner Wad makes a motion. Commissioner Wallace, do you have a second?
I will second that motion.
Why, thank you, Commissioner Wallace. With that, I will put that to a vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And it is unanimous. Thank you for joining us. Have a great night.